Undercover boss orders breakfast, freezes when the waitress says she hasn't been paid in weeks. Under the soft morning sunlight, Peter, the founder and owner of the Sunrise restaurant chain, stood silently before the glass doors of his very first branch. 15 years ago, this was where the greatest dream of his life had begun. From the old wooden tables, the irresistible scent of pancakes, and the warmth of freshly brewed coffee, Peter had once believed that Sunrise was not just a place to sell breakfast, but a place where people could find hope to start a new day. But now, that once radiant light seemed to have dimmed. Though monthly financial reports still arrived, presenting steady growth charts and customer satisfaction indexes, skillfully polished, Peter, with the instincts of a man who had struggled through the hardest early days of his business, knew something was wrong. Revenue had begun to stagnate, scattered customer complaints appeared on social media, and key personnel across various branches were resigning without clear reasons. Peter understood clearly, numbers could be adjusted, but the spirit of people could never be concealed. So that morning, instead of sitting in his high-rise office filled with the scent of expensive cologne and the clatter of keyboards, Peter put on a simple jacket, pulled down the brim of his cap, and became just another ordinary customer. No managers followed, no entourage to assist. He pushed open the heavy glass door of Sunrise Diner, the very place that had once been his pride, and quietly stepped inside, with a heavy heart and a deep, aching question. Did the sunrise of Sunrise still live up to the name he had once given it? Or had that light already faded somewhere along the way, lost in the frantic chase for profit? Beneath the warm yellow lights of Sunrise Diner, Peter sat alone at his familiar table by the window, the same seat where, years ago, he had spent countless hours nurturing his entrepreneurial dream. But this time, as a stranger, he simply observed, waiting for a simple breakfast, a plate of pancakes and a black coffee, just like the old days. A young woman approached, gently placing the coffee on the table. Her smile was kind and polite, but her eyes, Peter recognized that look immediately. It wasn't just fatigue from a long shift, it was the quiet sorrow of burdens too heavy to bear. The same burdens he once carried on his own weary shoulders as a young man. He quietly thanked her, not eager to strike up conversation. But as she turned away, Peter caught the sound of a heavy sigh from behind the counter. "Looks like we're not getting paid this week either." The girl's voice was barely more than a breath, as if she wanted to hide her worries along with it. "Still no pay?" another colleague asked softly, anxiety written all over their face. "It's been 3 weeks already, sis. If I quit, I lose everything. I still have to pay my mom's hospital bills." Her voice trailed off, and she quietly went back to work as if that conversation had never happened. Peter felt like something had just clenched his heart. The coffee in his hand seemed to grow cold instantly, and the clinking sounds of cups around him faded into a distant echo. 3 weeks without pay? And those hospital bills? That heavy burden weighing down her fragile shoulders? What about the others bustling in the kitchen? Those forced, weary smiles? Were they also quietly enduring injustices that the man at the helm of this entire system had never known about? Peter looked around the space. The perfect reports, the rising growth charts, the flattering praise in board meetings, all of it suddenly felt meaningless. And at that exact moment, he realized this breakfast was not just another meal. It was the moment that changed the way he looked at the entire empire he had built with his own hands. The sunrise of Sunrise, perhaps it had never been darker. From that morning on, Peter was no longer just a CEO sitting behind a desk, signing off on polished reports. He returned to that old branch, the one that should have been the brightest symbol of sunrise, not just once, but many times at different hours of the day. In the mornings, he arrived when the diner had just opened, quietly sitting in a corner, watching the employees start their day with dark circles under their eyes from sleepless nights. Sometimes, he returned at noon when harsh sunlight poured through the aging window panes, its brilliance illuminating every crack in the walls that once seemed so solid. And on some nights, he stayed until late, when the soft clatter of spoons and dishes echoed in the kitchen, and weary footsteps marked the end of yet another exhausting day. With each return, Peter witnessed more bitter truths that no report had ever dared to mention. 10 a.m. The old storage room. In that dim, musty storeroom, he saw it with his own eyes. Garithi branch manager shaking hands firmly with a shady supplier. A thick envelope exchanged hands like a routine transaction. In return came crates of cheap, substandard ingredients, faded labels, pancake flour speckled with green mold, and syrup bottles that smelled faintly of nothing but diluted chemical sugar. Peter clenched his fists, his heart aching as he thought of the dishes that had once made Sunrise famous, now reduced to a mere shadow, distorted by greed and neglect. Peter quietly observed each plate being brought out. The once famous pancakes of Sunrise were now nothing but crumbly batter with bland flavors. The omelette a proud signature dish, were greasy and diluted to the point where their original rich taste had vanished. A low murmur of complaints rippled across the room. The coffee's too weak. These pancakes taste like they came straight from the supermarket. Over at the cashier counter, Gary just shrugged slightly, forcing a weak smile before quickly slipping into his office, leaving the overworked staff to handle the customers' dissatisfied stares on their own. Peter stood silently in the shadows, his eyes heavy as he watched Lynette's fragile girl curled up by the warehouse steps. In her hands was a worn hospital bill, the dead amounts glaring in bright red on her phone screen. She kept flipping the bill over and over, as if staring at it long enough might somehow make the number shrink. No complaints, no sobbing. She simply brushed away a tear and pulled out a small, dry loaf of bread, biting a few quick mouthfuls just to silence her hunger. Her eyes stayed fixed on the phone screen, where a cold message stared back at her. Power disconnection notice, effective tomorrow. But just moments later, when the doorbell chimed, she stood up, straightened her old apron, took a deep breath, and walked back out to the counter with the warmest smile she could muster, as if no storm had ever raged inside her heart. In that moment, Peter suddenly realized the Sunrise he had once dreamed of was now lost somewhere amidst calculations and indifference. And if he didn't act immediately, Sunrise's lifelong dream would slowly die in the very home he had built with his own hands. Nearly 11 p.m. Peter still sat there, in a dark corner near the exit. Outside, the neighboring stores had already pulled down their shutters. The sound of traffic had faded. Inside Sunrise, only a few employees remained, quietly cleaning up. From time to time, a weary sigh echoed from the empty kitchen. Peter cast his tired gaze toward the fogged-up window. Another night had passed, and these young people still hadn't had a proper meal or a genuine, unforced smile. From behind the bar, he faintly heard Lena's voice, tired but still trying to sound cheerful, as she spoke to a colleague. "I think I'll ask to leave early tomorrow. My mom's condition has gotten worse again." Another voice rose softly, choked with emotion. "Lena, why don't you just quit? What's left to hold on to in this place?" Lena smiled faintly, but her voice sounded like it was breaking into pieces. "Because I still believe this place can be warm again, like it used to be. At least one day it'll live up to its name, Sunrise, and bring a brighter day to someone." Peter felt his heart twist painfully. A fragile girl, buried in debt and burdened with the harshness of daily life, still stubbornly held on to a shred of hope for a place Heights' founder had long let drift away from its original ideals. Suddenly, the sharp sound of a shattering glass echoed from the kitchen. Peter jolted upright. As he hurried toward the noise, the scene that unfolded before him made his heart sink. Lena was kneeling on the floor, shards of a broken cup scattered around her trembling hands. In the dim light, her face was pale, her eyes glistening, yet she held her head high, refusing to let her tears fall again. Peter stepped closer without a word. He knelt beside her, silently picking up the shards of glass with his bare hands, not caring that his fingers were soon cut and bleeding. Lena stared in shock at the man she had always thought was just another regular customer. In that moment, as the light from above fell on his face, she suddenly realized the ordinary man she greeted every morning was none other than Peter the founder of Sunrise. "Mr. Peter?" she stammered, her lips trembling. Peter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gently took her cold hands in his, and his eyes, no longer cold with the distance of a CEO, were filled with the sorrow of a father who had just realized he had abandoned his child in the very home he had built. "You don't need to keep apologizing for things that aren't your fault, Lena," he said softly. "If anyone should be apologizing, it's me." At that moment, the tears Lena had held back for so long finally spilled over. But this time, they were tears of releases, if a heavy burden had been lifted. For once, someone in power had finally chosen to see and acknowledge the pain endured by people like her. Peter stood up, his gaze firm, his voice clear and unwavering in the silent night. "Tomorrow, everything will change. The true sunrise of this place will begin again, right here." The air in Sunrise Diner felt thick with tension. Staff gathered in hushed clusters around the corners of the restaurant, faces filled with uncertainty. Rumors about someone important arriving today spread like wildfire. Exactly 9 a.m., the glass door swung open. No longer the humble man in a low-pulled cap, this was Peter, founder of Sunrise, stepping in with the poise of a true leader. A sleek gray suit, tie neatly adjusted, and a gleaming silver name badge catching the light under the ceiling lamps. Peter Harrison, CEO, founder, Sunrise Restaurant Group. The room fell silent. Gary, the branch manager, went pale, swallowing hard as Peter's cold, piercing gaze swept over him. Lena stood still behind the cashier counter, her eyes wide with shock and a hint of fear. Peter walked directly to the center of the room, his voice firm and resolute, each word cutting through the air like a blade, slicing through the web of lies. I once promised myself that Sunrise would be the place where every day begins with hope. But it seems that dawn has long been clouded by the greed and selfishness of a few. He signaled to the technical team. The large screen lit up. Footage from the surveillance cameras played clearly for all to see. Gary accepting a thick envelope from a supplier, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction as substandard pancake flour was pushed into the storage room. Footage of him casually signing off on shipments with no traceable origin. A chilling voice recording of Gary. If you want the good shifts, you know what to do. Pay your internal fund dues in time. And finally, the screen showed Lena, sitting in the freezing stockroom, her tearful eyes glancing over heart-wrenching notifications. Medical bills, unpaid. Tuition fees, overdue. Electricity, shut-off notice, effective tomorrow. She bit into a dry loaf of bread, trying to calm her empty stomach. The room filled with heavy, stifled breaths and murmurs of outrage. Peter turned sharply, his eyes locking onto Gary like a hawk. Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your immediate termination? Gary stammered, his hands visibly shaking. I was just following cost-cutting policies, sir. Peter cut him off coldly. Cutting costs should never come at the price of human dignity and decency. As of this moment, you are officially terminated. And to anyone else who aided and abetted this cruelty, if you wish to leave this room now, I will not stop you. Several junior managers quietly stood, heads bowed, and left the room in a heavy, suffocating silence. Peter turned to Lena, his gaze softening. He stepped forward, gently asking, with everything you've endured, why do you still stay here? Lena tightened the cloth in her hands, her eyes reddened, but her gaze remained unwavering. Her voice was soft but echoed throughout the hall. Because I still hope that one day, this place will truly be as warm as the family breakfast we all once dreamed of. In that moment, Peter felt his chest tighten with an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. He pulled out a bank card and gently placed it in Lena's hands. There's $50,000 in this account, enough for you to take care of your family and finish the dreams you've left unfinished. This isn't a gift. It's an investment for a woman who never let her circumstances dim the light in her heart. Are you ready to keep moving forward, Lena? Lena broke down in tears, but this time they were tears of hope, not sorrow. She bowed deeply as thunderous applause erupted across the hall. Peter turned back to face the crowd, his voice ringing loud and clear. From today, Lena officially becomes a trainee in Sunrise's senior management program. We do not just serve breakfast here. We serve dreams, we nurture hopes, and we bring back the dawn we once lost. The true sunrise for this company starts today. The entire room exploded with applause, and at that very moment, Peter knew the sunrise had truly returned. Amid the echoing applause, the atmosphere in the hall felt as if it had finally awakened after years of darkness. But Peter wasn't finished yet. He slowly stepped to the center of the room, his eyes scanning each faces that had quietly suffered injustices in the very shadows he, unknowingly, had allowed to grow. And I'm not stopping here. His voice lowered but grew heavier with conviction. Starting today, I am signing the complete restructuring of the entire Sunrise system, a reform from its very roots. We will abolish all internal funds and wipe away every unwritten rule that's quietly governed this place for far too long. He paused, then raised the reform plan freshly signed that very morning. The new policy includes 1. Substantial welfare increases for all employees. No one will have to worry about meals, medical expenses, or their children's education ever again. Absolute transparency in tip distribution. Every cent left by customers will go directly to the deserving hands of the service staff. 3. Sunrise Reborn Leadership Training Program. Anyone, whether a server or head chef, as long as they have the ambition and resilience, can become the future leaders of Sunrise. The applause rang out once more, this time not just out of courtesy, but because genuine belief was finally being rekindled. Peter turned back to Lena, his gaze warmer than ever. Lena, I am not only giving you an opportunity, but entrusting you with a mission. You will reignite the flame right here at this branch. Turn this place into the home that people like you once dreamed of. a place where no more silent tears fall behind the kitchen doors. Lena covered her mouth, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. She stepped onto the honor stage, receiving her new name tag directly from Peter's hands. Lena Collins, branch manager, Sunrise Diner. Soft music filled the hall, blending with unending applause. Peter looked around the room one last time, his eyes shining with contentment, but he didn't leave immediately. He quietly made his way to the rooftop of the place with the largest glass window. Outside, the city lights sparkled, reflecting on the lively streets below. From up there, he could see the entire Sunrise Diner restaurant now bustling with laughter, the sweet aroma of fresh pancakes wafting through the streets. Peter smiled, his eyes lingering for a long time, at the service counter, where Lena was gently guiding the new staff. She stood there, not just as a manager, but like a small, glowing lantern lighting up the entire space, bringing back the warmth Sunrise had long forgotten. Peter slowly closed his eyes, resting his hand on the cool window pane, feeling the breeze and the very first rays of dawn filtering through the glass. In that moment, he whispered, "Sunrise has finally found the light it truly deserves." And he knew, from that day forward, Sunrise was no longer just a brand name. It had become a living promise, a promise of new beginnings, of hope, and of the best that people can offer one another. The story did not end as the first rays of dawn crept through the glass windows of Sunrise Diner. But this time, that light didn't just shine over polished tables or neatly arranged kitchens. It illuminated the faces of people who now held their heads high, no longer burdened by sorrow. After that historic reform, Sunrise Diner embraced a brand new identity, not merely through freshly cleaned curtains or sparkling floors, but through the very hearts of the people who worked there. The Sunrise Reborn policy was signed and enacted by Peter Harrison that very day without delay, without hesitation. Employee welfare greatly increased. A livable base salary, comprehensive medical support packages, and scholarships for employees' children were implemented across the entire system. Every employee now had the right to live with dignity, worthy of their hard work. Full transparency and tip sharing, no more murky internal funds. Every penny left by customers went directly into the hands of those who deserved it. The tip-sharing boards were publicly displayed every day, standing as a promise of fairness. Sunrise's culture, rewritten from the ground up. Not just beautiful slogans, but living commitments embodied in every action. Respect, kindness, sustainable growth. And then, during the launch ceremony of the new policy, under the warm golden lights, Peter personally pinned a shining name tag on Lena's chest. Lena Collins, Assistant General Manager, Sunrise Diner. Standing before the entire team of new employees, Lena was no longer the small, calloused-handed, and sorrowful-eyed girl from before. She stood tall, smiling radiantly, her eyes brimming with pride as she shared her story. "I once thought I was just a tiny waitress, dreaming of things far beyond my reach. But then I realized dawn only comes when we dare to open our hearts, dare to believe that everything can begin again. And today, right here, I want to tell all of you, never give up hope." End of third. Applause echoed, not only from those standing around Lena, but from longtime customers, families gathered at breakfast tables, and even from the new hires, the very people who would carry forward this journey of revival. When everything settled, Peter quietly left the hall and walked up to the highest floor of the building. Standing before the enormous glass window, he silently gazed down at Sunrise Dinner now, filled with cheerful voices, the sweet scent of pancakes carried on the soft morning breeze, blending with the memories of days long past when he had flipped every pancake with his own hands over that old battered skillet. Peter slowly closed his eyes, resting his hand on the cool glass. There were no longer haunting numbers, no towering financial reports, only a quiet voice in his heart, gentle but profound. This is the sunrise I once dreamed of. The story isn't over, because the most beautiful things have only just begun. From the high floor, Peter stood quietly by the vast window, where the morning sunlight shimmered and stretched across rooftops, the golden beams dancing over the pristine glass. Below, Sunrise Diner was busier than ever. But what made his heart stir wasn't the packed table sit, was the sight of those truly radiant smiles from the very people whose eyes had once been clouded with despair. On the small stage tucked in the corner of the restaurant, Lena stood not merely as a branch manager, but as a newly kindled flame, spreading warmth throughout Sunrise. She was leading the orientation session for the new generation of staff. Her voice, soft yet firm, echoed through the microphone. "Remember this, every time you welcome a new day at Sunrise, it's not just the start of a shift, it's the moment to spread kindness, to bring someone a little spark of light that they might not find anywhere else all day. Peter looked down and caught a moment that made him smile deeply. Lena was gently helping a new employee adjust their apron, patiently fixing the clumsy, lopsided knot. Her eyes shone with warmth and resilience, as if she herself embodied everything that Sunrise had once lost and now was finding again. Outside, the scent of freshly baked pancakes mingled with the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee. Groups of customers walked through the door, the familiar jingle of the bell sounding like a cheerful melody greeting the morning. A small boy tugged at his mother's hand, pointing excitedly at the pastry display, his eyes sparkling with joy. It was the exact scene Peter had once dreamed of, back when he was a young man standing behind a battered old food cart, longing for the day he could bring something good and beautiful to the world. And now, he didn't have to imagine anymore. That dawn, that dream, it was right here, unfolding before his very eyes. Peter gently tightened his hand against the cool glass window, closing his eyes for a moment to imprint this scene deeply into his heart. As a soft breeze drifted through the open window, he whispered a promise to himself and to Sunrise Diner. This is the dawn I always dreamed of, and this time, it will never fade again. Asterisk. You can build an empire, pile up dazzling numbers on financial reports, but if you forget why you started and lose sight of the people who walked beside you, it all becomes nothing more than a castle built on sand. A truly lasting enterprise is not built on glossy business plans, but on hearts that have been warmed, dreams that have been reignited, and lives that have found their way back to the light because of you. In the end, success is not measured by profits, but by how many people have found hope and light in their lives simply because of one thing: you were there, right when they needed you. Asterisk.